Imagine a bank account so vast it could fund the entire global economy for a year. Between 1765 and 1938, the British Empire extracted an estimated $45 trillion from the Indian subcontinent. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a calculation based on 2 centuries of tax and trade data. We are often taught that colonialism was a chaotic period of civilizing missions or explorations, but the silent ledger reveals a different reality. It was a cold, calculated, and highly efficient, hostile corporate takeover of the planet. While we look at the ruins of empires as historical artifacts, their true legacy is alive today in the structure of every bank, every stock exchange, and every debt contract in the world. To understand modern wealth, you must stop looking at political maps and start looking at balance sheets. Colonialism was the process of converting sovereign life into liquid assets. Before the first colonial ship sailed, wealth was distributed based on local productivity and resources. After colonialism, wealth was redistributed according to who owned the accounting system. The empires didn't just take the gold, they took the right to define what value is. They rewritten the rules of the global ledger so that the labor of the majority would always settle as profit in the accounts of a tiny minority in the metropole. The greatest empires in history weren't actually started by kings or queens. They were started by shareholders. The British East India Company was the world's first multinational corporation with its own private army of 260,000 men, twice the size of the British sovereign army at the time. This entity proved that you don't need to govern a people if you can simply own their trade routes and their debt. The company operated as a state within a state, demonstrating for the first time that corporate interests could dictate the foreign policy of an entire nation. This was the birth of the silent ledger, where the pursuit of quarterly dividends justified the starvation of millions. The economic engine of the colonial era was mercantilism, a belief that global wealth was a fixed pie. For the mother country to have more, the colony had to have less. This was not free trade, it was a vacuum cleaner disguised as a merchant ship. Raw materials like cotton, silk, and spices were extracted for pennies, shipped to European factories, and then sold back to the colonized people as expensive manufactured goods. Laws were passed to ensure that colonies could only trade with their masters. It was a closed-loop system of exploitation that effectively banned the global South from ever accumulating its own capital. In 1750, India and China were the manufacturing powerhouses of the world, accounting for nearly 75% of global industrial output. By 1900, their share had collapsed to less than 5%. This was not an accident of the Industrial Revolution. It was a deliberate policy of industrial sabotage. In India, the British imposed massive tariffs on Indian textiles while flooding the market with duty-free British cloth. Legend even tells of weavers' thumbs being cut so they couldn't compete with the machines of Manchester. The goal was simple: turn advanced manufacturing civilizations into primitive resource farms for the rising West. When empires were finally forced to grant independence, they didn't leave quietly. They left a bill. The most egregious example is Haiti. After winning its independence from France in a bloody revolution, Haiti was forced to pay 150 million francs in reparations for the loss of French property, which included the value of the enslaved people themselves. France sent warships to enforce this debt. It took Haiti 122 years to pay it off, with interest. This ensured that the nation would remain in a state of permanent financial cardiac arrest, unable to invest in its own infrastructure because every cent went to French banks. Colonial apologists often point to the railroads and ports built by empires as gifts of modernization. But look at the design of these networks. The tracks didn't connect local villages or internal markets to each other. They ran in straight lines from mines and plantations directly to the deep water ports. This infrastructure was not built for the people. It was built for the cargo. It was a straw designed to suck the marrow out of the land as quickly as possible. Every mile of track was paid for by the colonized people themselves through heavy taxes, yet its only purpose was to facilitate their own dispossession. Colonialism didn't just rewrite human laws, it rewrote the biology of the planet. Empires forced entire regions to become single-crop factories. Rubber in Malaya, cotton in Egypt, tea in Ceylon, and sugar in the Caribbean. By destroying diverse, self-sustaining ecosystems and replacing them with monocultures, empires created a global south that was biologically and economically fragile. When the price of that single crop fell on the London Exchange, entire nations faced famine. We are still living with this ecological debt today, as former colonies struggled to diversify their economies in an era of climate instability. The term developing nation is a linguistic trick designed to hide a crime. These nations were not underdeveloped, they were actively overexploited. Poverty in the former colonies is not a natural state or a failure of culture. It is the physical residue of a ledger that was balanced in favor of London, Paris, and Lisbon. The wealth of the First World and the poverty of the Third World are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have the skyscrapers of Wall Street without the depleted mines of the Congo. They are mathematically linked in the global accounting system. By the mid-20th century, the physical occupation of land became too expensive. The empires lowered their flags, but they didn't give up control. They shifted from colonialism to neocolonialism. You no longer needed soldiers to control a country when you could control its currency and its debt. The administrative offices moved from colonial governors' mansions to the headquarters of the IMF and the World Bank. Today, the Global South pays more in debt interest to northern banks than it receives in all forms of foreign aid. The colonial straw is still there, it's just made of digital code now. Even in 2026, the structural audit of global power reveals a staggering imbalance. In the World Bank and the IMF, voting power is not based on population, but on financial contribution. This means that a handful of Western nations can veto any decision made by the rest of the world combined. An average citizen in Belgium has 180 times more voting power in these institutions than an average citizen in Ethiopia. The financial architecture built in the wake of World War II was designed to preserve the colonial hierarchy under a veneer of international cooperation. Extraction in the modern era has moved from minerals to mines. Colonial education systems were originally designed to create a clerical class, locals who were English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect, to serve the administration. Today, that same mechanism acts as a global talent filter. The best doctors, engineers, and scientists from the global south are incentivized to move to the north, where the capital is concentrated. This is a silent form of extraction that prevents these nations from ever building the intellectual infrastructure needed for true independence. The global trade system is rigged through what economists call the terms of trade. Former colonies are largely stuck exporting raw materials which have low profit margins and volatile prices. Meanwhile, they must import high-value technology and manufactured goods from the north. As technology becomes more complex and expensive, while commodities like coffee or copper stay relatively cheap, these nations must work twice as hard every year just to buy the same amount of equipment. It is a hamster wheel designed to keep the debtor in a state of perpetual labor. Much of the wealth extracted during the colonial era and the wealth being extracted now does not stay in the public accounts of any nation. It migrates into a shadow network of offshore tax havens. These jurisdictions, many of which are former British Crown colonies, are the modern descendants of colonial trade routes. They are designed to hide wealth from the very people and governments from whom it was taken. This silent ledger of offshore trillions ensures that the world's resources remain invisible and untaxable by those who need them most. As we move further into 2026, the world is entering a period of the Great Audit. Former colonies are no longer asking for aid. They are asking for a settlement of accounts. From the return of stolen artifacts to the demand for climate reparations, the conversation is shifting. Nations are starting to calculate the unpaid labor and stolen resources of the last 300 years. If the global ledger were truly balanced today, the Western financial system would be declared insolvent overnight. We are witnessing a tectonic shift in the global balance sheet. The rise of the BRICS plus nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the new members, is the first serious attempt in 200 years to create a ledger that does not run through Washington or London. By creating their own development banks and trading in local currencies, these nations are attempting to break the debt trap of the post-colonial era. This is not just a political move, it is an act of financial secession from a rigged system. The debate over reparations is often framed as guilt over the past, but for the silent ledger, it is about math in the present. It's not just about a one-time payment, it's about restructuring a global system where the interest rates for a country in Africa are 5 times higher than for a country in Europe. Closing the colonial account requires more than apologies. It requires a complete rewrite of how global credit and risk are calculated. To understand the present, we must dismantle the myth that Western prosperity was built solely on innovation or democracy. While those played a role, they were fueled by a massive uncompensated transfer of energy, labor, and minerals. The Industrial Revolution was literally lubricated by the forced labor of millions. To ignore this is to fail the audit of reality. Modern wealth is not a sign of superior values, but a sign of a superior ledger that allowed one part of the world to capitalize on the suffering of the other. History is repeating itself. The same forces that colonized the land in the 1800s are now trying to colonize the digital commons and the biological cycles of the planet. As we discussed with natural asset companies, the goal is the same: to take something that was once free, like the air or your data, and put it on a corporate balance sheet. If we do not understand how the first colonial ledger worked, we will be powerless to stop the second one from being written. History is not just a collection of dates, It is a series of transactions. The colonial era did not end, it simply evolved. But a ledger that never balances eventually collapses under its own weight. Our task today is to look at the hidden lines of this history, acknowledge the true debts, and finally begin writing a new story, one where wealth is not something to be extracted, but something to be shared. The audit is ongoing. I am the auditor. This is the silent ledger.